Hello, thank you for being here. I'm going to let us in first.
Hello, Rabbi.
And Simon Tov, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, Simon Tov, Simon Tov, Mazel Tov.
Mazel Tovs here.
I can't believe Matt is married. How the hell did that happen?
Matt is married. Ariella is married.
I mean, it's like, how does that happen, though?
Well, your bar mitzvah speech propelled him on.
Yeah, that's it. The check's in the mail, Leonard.
It's so good to see all of you. What a privilege.
This is great.
Hey, Bob. Hi, Ariella.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, hello.
It's like Matt married is like Andy Markowitz having 2 children. It's like, it just blows your mind.
Yeah.
Even more so than Andy Markowitz having 2 children is Michelle having 2 children. It's like, when does that happen?
Yeah. Well,
This is lovely. Hello, everyone. I am thrilled to see you all and grateful for this. It's just going to be a conversation. I'm going to do my best to highlight people and spotlight people and stuff like that. But I had sent you the thought questions, and then I suspect people are going to want to ask questions or the like. And so, excuse me, we're going to let that happen. My camera is falling off my screen. Give me a second. There we go. But I'm excited to see you all. It's fun to see you all. My goodness.
Nice to be gathered together.
Yes,
Yep.
it's nice to be together.
So how cold is it in Canada?
Today it is 6 degrees right now, so that's
I knew
40
he was
degrees.
thinking Celsius. I knew.
It's 40
I
degrees.
still can't think in Celsius.
I grew up in Winnipeg, so there's a lot coming back here that's just like muscle memory. Spelling, for example, I don't even think about it anymore of the OU for like
yeah,
color
like
and flavor and neighbor, or the RE for theater or center. That's just like automatic. The other thing was in Canada, it's grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, not first grade, second grade, third grade. So that's automatic. I find myself every once in a while slipping into process too, instead of process, especially if I'm talking to somebody else who's saying it. So there's a lot of muscle memory. The metric system is certainly the easiest one. The metric system is so much easier than the imperial system. So,
But do you call it Shabbat?
That is true.
no, I call it Shabbat.
I'd like to point out that if in Philadelphia anyone ever said trust the process, you'd be run out of town.
Yeah, just pass the water. Pass
Water.
the water. Pass the
All
water.
right, it is 3 minutes to, and we have a large-ish waiting room of just under 30 screens, and some of these people I know are going to be multiple people on one screen, so this is going to be a nice gathering. And I think we should also, especially at the beginning, allow some room for just the nostalgic good and welfare piece of things. Certainly want to wish a mazel tov to Len and to Ariella. That will be a nice way to begin. Is there any other good and welfare that I should make a point of saying in this moment?
Eric, I may start it off. I may start it off if it's okay, and turn
Please.
to you just to welcome people and ask them to get me names for the list, etc.
Great. All right, well, I think we're gonna admit everyone in. I recognize all of these names, so I don't think there's anyone who's,
Zoom bombing us.
yes. They may be, but they're not technologically capable of it. And we have about 35 screens right now. So is everyone ready? Is everyone comfortable? Cool. I'm gonna let everyone in. Wow. Welcome, everyone. We're going to be starting in just a couple of minutes as people log on and join in.
A pretty good chance
Hey, Ariella.
some of them are probably going to look for jobs anyway. If they don't want to be back in the office.
I'm just waving to everybody. Hello, everyone. It's been a long time.
Very nice. Here we go. More people coming.
Hi.
And Jeff Hurrick,
I'll be
I
right
love your
back.
background.
Hi, everyone. This is so
We have
fun.
a lot of people coming in. So
I think all these people are for Bob. It's all for Bob Rubin, Rabbi Rubin.
Hi, Eric.
good to see you.
Thank you. It's nice to see you too.
Susan's joining us. Hello.
We
Yeah.
are,
We're going to wait just another minute if that's okay, and then we'll get started. So thank you, everyone, for joining this great occasion.
Anybody we know? Anybody we know? Did you recognize the name of the female?
Okay.
Sid? Hi, Ariella.
Hi, Marcia.
Hey, Marcia.
Hi, how are you?
Well,
Like
it's 12:31, and I think we're going to get started with some introductory remarks. First, if I can ask everybody to mute, that would be great courtesy to our panel and to everyone else. So if you can figure out how to mute your connection, please do, so the sound can be optimal. And I think we have a couple of more left to mute. First of all, thank you and welcome to the Adath Israel November Lunch and Learn session. It's great to see so many people with us. I wanted to remind people that in addition to muting, except when you want to ask a question or comment, please let me know if you'd like to be added to our Lunch and Learn email list so you get notices of these sessions as we go forward. And I'll put on the chat my email address. Most importantly, we're so honored to welcome our rabbis home. Good afternoon to Rabbis Wernick and Rosen and Rubin and Markowitz, and of course, Rabbi Yanoff. It is a privilege for each of us that have a chance to listen and watch today to have the rabbis of Adath Israel speak with us. We're very, very fortunate. So without further delay, I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Eric to introduce and reintroduce our panel and to moderate today's Lunch and Learn discussion. Rabbi Eric.
thank you so much, Len, and thank you for being a steady force in making this Lunch and Learn, even through pandemic, making this Lunch and Learn thrive and continue. I'm not looking off away from you all, but I'm letting people in still. They're pouring in, fueled by excitement to see rabbis past and present, and maybe a little bit of nostalgia. So
Eric,
I am,
forgot to thank each of the rabbis. Then I'm going
that's
to
where I'm going.
each of the rabbis for over many years putting in the effort, diligence, and talent to contribute to our Lunch and Learn sessions, starting with Rabbi Wernick in 2002. Each of the rabbis you're going to hear from have presented and taught us for years. So I forgot to thank them for that. Sorry, Eric, no more for me.
That's fine. It's thrilling to be with colleagues and friends. And so I want to reintroduce to you the cavalcade of Adath Israel rabbis as we have them. And these are familiar faces, and I hope and I know that for the rabbis here, we're all smiling just to see your faces. Here's what's going to happen today. We're going to have a conversation about what has been, where we are now, and what's going forward. And with that, I want to reintroduce first Rabbi Steve Wernick. This is just in the order of my Zoom screen. And Rabbi Wernick is currently freezing in 6 degrees Celsius, Canada, but doing beautiful and wonderful things. And we are thrilled to see you. Rabbi Wernick, would you like to say a quick hello?
Hi, everyone. It's really great to see you all again and to be here. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Rabbi Ariella Rosen, who is also currently in Canada, though is trying to make a step south of the border. We'll see. And we wish a mazel tov on your recent wedding. This is my first Zoom on with you since then, but not with your wife. So I was with Becca the other day. So we are thrilled to have you. Please unmute yourself and say hello.
Hi, I'm like really overcome by how emotional it feels to see all of your faces and names. It's so good. It's so good to see all of you. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Rabbi Rubin, who has long history with some of you from Bet Tefillah and deep history with many of us from the combination with Adath Israel and his service to both congregations. We wish maybe it's a preemptive mazel tov, or we'll see how it works out. Condolences depending on, rabbinical school can be a long slog, but Rabbi Rubin's daughter-in-law is Miriam has recently enrolled in the Jewish Theological Seminary. So she's going to learn the fight song for JTS soon. But Rabbi Rubin, please say hello.
Hello to everyone, and it's great to be here. And we are glad that Daniel and Miriam are both connected to Adath Israel, and we're able to keep up.
Wonderful. And a current partner in crime, Rabbi Andrew Markowitz, who this is a recent one. Even those of you who forget quickly,
all so much.
Nostalgia.
I've missed your faces so much. No, it's wonderful to be here. I really thank you. I'm excited to be up here with Gdolim, really, that I remember from when I was growing up in the area. And this is a real treat to learn and teach with my rabbis too. So this is great. Oh, and of course we have Rabbi Eric Yanoff, my partner in prayer. Why don't you introduce yourself?
It is just a thrill to be with all of you. It really is. And to just be in the presence of and the company of people who have given and thought deeply about this place is really a pleasure, and I am just feeling very grateful at the moment. What we are going to do today is, as I said, think about our community, not only Adath Israel, but the state of Judaism and institutional communal gathering in general. We are going to think about where we are, where we've come from, especially these rabbis who in many ways honed their rabbinical sharpness here at Adath Israel, and any lessons learned that are now being applied, and perspectives for the future. And so with that, I'm going to open it up. These are very open-ended questions, and my hope is that we will allow the conversation to take us where it will, allowing some time at the end for questions and comments. I think given the size of this group, which is always a wonderful problem to have on Zoom, but you spilled into 2 screens, even in my maximal screen approach here. So so the way that maybe it is best is if you want to put a question in the chat, let's use the chat as the way that we can continue to the conversation, because it's going to be very difficult to have people talking over one another on Zoom. So let's use the chat. If you're not comfortable sharing your question to everyone, you can certainly share it directly to me, and I will I'll offer it to the group. So please do that. But we're going to start with a question of looking back to your, well, maybe for Rabbi Markowitz, not so far back, but looking back on your time at Adath Israel and your time since, what are you seeing in trends in communal Jewish living, this sort of brand of centrist, moderate, conservative Judaism? Where are we headed? Strengths and liabilities in today's world. This can be a specific thing about COVID, which sort of feels front and center in everyone's mind, but it doesn't have to be. Just in general, your impressions as you look back on the world that was when you were serving at Adath Israel, and lessons that you've learned or trends that you have seen. So if anyone wants to begin, I'll open it up. You don't have to be the first one to speak, but you have to be the second one.
Well, back in my day, no, what I think is interesting is I have the unique experience of having been a teen sort of adjacent to the community and seeing this community grow personally through the lens of my family. So while I don't have sort of where we've been, and I'm part of where we're at now and where we're going, I think just seeing the trends and how the congregation has swelled and grown and really changed over the course of my lifetime based on the rabbinic leadership and just who happens to be in the room at any given moment, right? I think that's just an interesting observation. I also will say that I am a firm believer in the lasting potential of Jewish institutions and synagogues, and I think we're on a good path. And ultimately, what it comes down to is relationship, and it's clear based on the sort of the warm welcomes that everyone's been having that those relationships are foundational and have been foundational to so many people, including the rabbis, and our connection to Judaism and our connection to Amcha, to the Jewish people. So I want to thank you for doing that for us as throughout that time. That's rejuvenating. I'll stop. I just wanted to sort of break the ice a little bit so that someone else could feel comfortable, because you hear enough from me as it is.
I'll go next. So obviously, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this question and spent a decade at USCJ trying to really position the entire conservative movement for the reality that I think we're in at this moment, and which, if you've been paying attention for the last 20 years, the trends were all pointing to this place and to this moment. And what COVID does, what any global trauma does, is it turns the spotlight on these trends and makes explicit what was already implicit and what people that were paying attention were already knowing. And I think that Rabbi, I can't say that, Andy was right. We're going to be less formal here. And Andy was right. It's always about relationships, and it's about the human spirit and helping people access an authentic wisdom and practice of Judaism to answer the challenges of living in our moment. And those challenges are great, we're living in a moment of mass disruption. To put it another way, in terms of what I'm thinking about with regard to this, is Facebook just changed its company's name, and forget all the politics for a moment about whether or not it was a trick to try to draw people's attention away from all the challenges that they have in terms of privacy and their algorithms and so forth and so on. At the essence, what they announced was they were taking this billion-dollar company and they were going to focus it for the next 10 years on the intersection of social connections in reality, augmented reality, and virtual reality. And our synagogues are still talking about Musaf. And so I think that, when we think about the massive wave of disruption that we're living through now, all of we can't continue to run sacred communities on a 19th century, 20th century model. COVID has certainly brought that home. If you weren't thinking about live streaming, you are now. If you're not thinking about how live streaming and a blended in-person online audience works, you're not seeing what's happening in the world. If you haven't realized that even the notion of membership as a club, as opposed to engagement, is a massive change that's going on. And it's not just in terms of language and semantics, but how we fund these institutions. And the fact that, Adath Israel's a 100,000 square foot facility, and for 18 months was virtually empty. My facility here in Canada is 120,000 square feet, and for 18 months it was empty, right? So it's not about the building. It's about how do you engage people, how do you connect with people, and how do you give them the tools and the resources and the community that helps them navigate life's circumstances, to elevate the simchas, and to comfort and catch the tsa'ar, the sorrow that's in there. And so that's begadol, that's it. And the only other thing I would ask is, I think one of the things that we see for sure right now is issues of loneliness and anxiety on the bookmarks of the life cycle, on people that are older on one side, and on young people on the other side, as a result of the negative impacts of social media and so forth. There's so much pastoral work that has to be done at this moment. And so we here at Bet Tzedek, we're talking about literally creating a center for spiritual counseling and recruiting people to one of the local universities to get an MSW in therapy, in psychology, and so forth, but with a specific track on Jewish spirituality and so forth, and creating a center here for that kind of work. Which, by the way, I wish I could say that I was so innovative, but that's what VBS, Valley Bet Shalom, in Encino has done, and Park Avenue in New York has just hired a full-time therapist on their staff as well. So I think that that's one of the things that we have to look towards to the future. It's all about the human condition. It's all about relationships, and how we fund the infrastructure to do that is also about relationships. I think ultimately is going to be a combination of fee for service and philanthropy. But I'll stop there and allow others to respond as well.
I'll just add a little bit. The conservative movement had a motto for a very long time called tradition and change. And even though it's kind of an old motto, I think it's still relevant, but as Steve was pointing out, it's the change that changes. And every generation, every year, actually, new changes pop up. And but it's still that balance between our traditions from ancient times and modern and more modern times, and confronting the changes that come up. And that is the challenge. I guess that's the ongoing challenge of integrating those two together.
Thank you. Thank you all from your insight.
Oh,
Rabbi
so
Rose. Yes.
I'm just thinking about this question from I guess, a different angle of just having, I guess, thinking about the rabbinic experiences I've had so far, starting with being at Adath Israel with all of you, and then working in rabbinical school admissions, and then and now working at Hillel in a pluralistic environment with students, and how each one has really informed the other and helped clarify a picture. And I would affirm, a lot of what has already been said here, and just add a little bit too, and say that I think the trends that I see that are working, which is actually one of the most important learnings I got from my time at Adath Israel, was the power of intergenerational space. That when a space is truly intergenerational, there's true interaction that is meaningful and authentic between people of vastly different kinds of experiences, that is so healthy and so generative and so important. And that's sort of not about conservative Judaism, that's more about the strength of community in general. And I think something that, I actually even comes up in the conversations I have with the university students I work with right now, where they're very much in a bubble, mostly with other people their own age. I would also say, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, this is what I wanted to say also, which is that I think where we are and where we're going is that that this brand of Judaism isn't going to go anywhere. There is always going to be a yearning for what former Chancellor Arnie Eisen liked to call the vital center of this holding this core together, that's so that we don't fully polarize into opposite directions, which is what is happening in our world politically, but does not need to happen to us Jewishly. And that some of the appeal actually of conservative Judaism that I noticed in my time working in rabbinical and cantorial school admissions is that there's a strong desire to connect to this brand of Judaism from a lot of people who have historically seen themselves outside of the mainstream of the Jewish world. And so we're getting a lot of leadership coming through rabbinical schools, not just in programs where you might assume that to be the case, but really in sort of mainstream conservative movement organizations. We have a lot of people who have, would say that because of their identities, they would say, I didn't have a place in a conservative shoulder. I didn't see myself there. But there's a real connection to this type of Judaism. So a lot of Jews by choice, a lot of Jews of color, a lot of LGBTQ Jews, a lot of Jews with disabilities who are saying, like, I want to step into leadership right now because I either want to be the role model I never got to have, or I'm starting to see more examples of people like me in community. And they're not necessarily just doing it in sort of, they're choosing a very traditional model for this. They're choosing conservative Judaism, which has not historically always been the easiest brand of Judaism to make major change in. And still a lot of people are seeking it and saying, this is authentic, this is what I want, this is meaningful, and I want to make sure that other people have access to it too. And I find that incredibly inspiring for where we are right now. So we're in good shape is what I'm trying to say.
Thank you. I want to pick up on a couple of things to usher us. I'm going to tell you the next question, which Rabbi Rosen, you picked up on in terms of your your comments about intergenerationalism as just beginning to at Adath Israel in your time here, at just beginning to scratch the surface of the power of diverse perspective. And then you went deeper into that in terms of your experience at JTS and also on the campus. And so thinking to the community as you know it or remember it here at Adath Israel, if you can, any of you, I'll give you the opportunity to think about this while I sort of do some synthesizing of what has been said so far. If you can think of an experience, a moment, a learning or a lesson that you took with you that comes back to you or returns to you. I know, Rabbi Rosen, you started that chain and that thought. That would be something I think that would enrich us here, make us also knowledgeable about what we're doing. That this is a two-way street, as Rabbi Markowitz said, of this relationship, that we drink from your well as well as community members, co-learners, and when rabbis move forth to do great things, having spent time in a community, like this one, the lessons are part of what we pack up when we pack up our offices. I know that from having been in Detroit and calling on those memories and sometimes hard lessons. So whether a positive or a cautionary lesson, that would be my question. I also want to draw in Rabbi Rubin and Rabbi Wernick, what you said about where we are, where we're going, and how in some ways affirming the need in this moment of isolation and uncertainty, the need for communities of togetherness, whether, as Rabbi Wernick, you said, we're reimagining them, or as Rabbi Rubin, you said, there's a tradition, and then there's a question of what is the change of the moment. How affirming it has been to be part of a community that was needed. Every person who has walked back in, and I'm sure that you've had this experience in your respective communities and re-entering and reconvenings, every person who has walked back into having been away has said, I forgot how much I needed this, or I needed this so much, or this was the place that was my constant, even online. And so I think that goes back full circle, Rabbi Rosen, to what you said of we're not going anywhere, right? This way of bringing people together, and as we read at the very beginning of the Torah, Lo tov liot ha'adam levado, that the need for togetherness, that isolation is as Rabbi Jill Mader said here, as part of the board of rabbis and Rodef Shalom, it's not conducive to the human condition, and that has been affirming. And yet the question is, how are we going to be together and gathering? So I've stalled a little bit, drawing threads from all of your opening comments. I'd love to hear, as specific as you can be, leaving out identifying characteristics, names, but you can tell us the thing that rhymes with those people's names. So you're like, to give us a hint. I'm just kidding. No, let us know. What is a memory of something that you've taken forward, a lesson, a caution, a moment that brings a smile to your face instead?
I think Rabbi Wernick's raising his hand.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm just trying to be polite.
That's very, very kind of you. Sorry, thank you. Go for it.
So the lessons from Adath Israel are many, but I'll name the ones that I think are the most profound for me. One is the importance of having really good lay partners that share the vision and are passionate to do the work. And so here I'm going to give props to Len. The fact that this Lunch and Learn is still going 19 years later is astonishing. That doesn't happen by itself. It happens because there's people who care about it and make it happen. I will also give props to Len that when he was president of Adath Israel was one of the largest years of growth that we had. And what I learned from Len was the importance of turning the entire congregation into the membership committee. And to think beyond the notion of membership, but about engaging people. At USCJ, I learned that as a marketing strategy, the Net Promoter Score, can you turn your congregants, your clients, your participants into your raving fans and promoters? And so one of the things that I like to measure is not only do people find the experience that they have within the constructs of the work that Tzedek and I do satisfying and meaningful, but would they recommend it to somebody else? And so that's the Net Promoter Score. 25 is considered to be excellent and 50 is considered to be world class, but Tzedek at this moment is about 30. So we still have work to do, but we're doing really well. So I learned that from Len. Mark Wusnich is on the phone and are on Zoom. He gave me permission to share this. What I learned also from Mark was that I remember sitting in now your office, Eric, a couple months before their bat mitzvah, their daughter's bat mitzvah. And Mark asked me why we never asked him to convert. And it was astonishing, because my answer was the traditional answer: Jews don't proselytize. That's just not what we do. So I never would have thought to ask him to do that. And I remember him saying to me, he was worried that maybe there's something wrong with him, because he said, everybody else is asking me to convert. The Protestants want me to be Protestant, the Catholics want me to be Catholics, this, that, and so forth and so on. And so what I learned from Mark was the importance of asking the real questions about identity and connection and so forth, and that people want to be asked those questions. And that was a really profound lesson about going deep in terms of relationship and so forth and so forth. And then the last thing that I'll say that impacted me about Adath Israel is I remember one Rosh Hashanah, I looked out in the congregation and I was bored in my own service. And I remember thinking to myself, if I'm bored, Kal v'chomer, what are they thinking? And I rewrote my Yom Kippur sermon that year, and it started, if aliens landed on our front lawn, what would they think was important to us? And I pointed out all the disconnects between what we say and what we actually do. And I challenged the congregation to come together and to start having some town hall meetings about who we want to be. And if you remember, we had a couple of those town hall meetings and a couple hundred people showed up for them. And that really began, I think, the process of serious strategic change at Israel. So those are three lasting lessons that have certainly impacted me from Adath Israel and continue to impact me as I continue to grow and to think about these things, and through new experiences and new learnings, I've been able to perhaps sharpen the way in which I do that more than I have in the past.
Thank you. I have permission to share the coda to the Mark story, the Mark Wernick story, which is that after Haley's bat mitzvah, he came to me, and the person who did ask him to convert that he finally listened to was his daughter, Rebecca, and said, I want you Jewish by my bat mitzvah. And Mark and I, well, let's just say, in any way, we were thrilled to have you a part of the community. But when you joined in that way and immersed in your Judaism, it was particularly sacred. And Mark is now president of our men's club. So get involved in the men's club, no matter where you are. How's that for a shameless plug? Anyone else want to share on the topic of a memory of a moment or a lesson? Go ahead, Rabbi Rosen, and then Rabbi Rubin.
Okay, I'm just going to share one, but you should all know that people I've worked with in the 2 jobs that I've had since being at Adath Israel have heard me often say, here's something I learned from my time at the first community I was with on the main line. I invoke my learning from being with all of you often still. You taught me how to be a rabbi. I was with you right out of rabbinical school, and I will always be shaped and changed by my time with you. So that feels important to say, even as I'm only going to share one example right now. So I learned this a lot from Rabbi Yanoff, but also really reinforced from all of you, which is that the idea that we should be taking what we do seriously, but not ourselves too seriously. And that there's a real importance to bring a lot of joy into what we do, and to feel a sense of that sense of joy when we show up. And the example that comes to mind, which is kind of a funny one now that I'm thinking about it, is we invited Jewish musician and singing communities expert Joey Weisenberg to spend a Shabbat with us. And I remember he gathered everybody around the bima for Musaf, tried to get everyone in close to sing together. And he's like, this is great. This is how we, when we're in proximity, we can sing well together. This is like not a thing we can even think about right now, but maybe one day soon we can come back to that. But I remember afterwards, he said to me, he was like, that was actually one of the harder experiences I've had in a community, because everyone was so chatty and everyone just like wanted to talk to each other. And I was like, this is actually great. Like, this is what it's about. And yes, like we want to make sure that we're taking care of our souls, and that our spiritual experiences are transformative and meaningful and work for us. But if we're not happy to see the people who are with us when we walk into the room, like, how's that going to work? And so something that I've learned from Adath Israel and that I try to bring wherever I go now is this sense of like, let's start with being really excited to see each other. And then let's see what we can do from there, because we can do much more once we get to that base level. So thank you for that.
Rabbi Rubin.
Yes, I was thinking about how both at Beth Tefillah and actually now in Brick at Beth Or, in a small congregation when I'm the only full-time employee, it's so different from Adath Israel, which had obviously a larger congregation and a team of staff. I remember when we first joined the merger in 2006, and Steve and I were meeting, leading up to that, and I remember one thing that he said, which really stuck with me. Of course, I basically, we park our egos at the door and work together for the betterment of the organization, of the synagogue, and that's something which I agreed with. And I think the idea of having a staff team work together, and then of course when Eric came on too, it continued. So to have that kind of staff team now. Again, I'm in a small congregation where I don't have, the other full-time people to be staff teams with, but the whole notion of teamwork, even with staff, myself and lay leadership as well, I keep talking to them about how it's a strategic partnership, and it's really should be teamwork and not bickering with each other. So, that's something that I still think about a lot.
Thank you. Rabbi Markowitz, what have you taken in, yesterday, for example?
So I'll say from my work experience is not as vast as many of my colleagues. I'm still at the genesis of my career, but I will say that the feeling that I got, just to sort of echo much of what has been said, in particular what Rabbi Rosen said about enjoying being together. I remember leaving the first executive meeting after my hire, and everyone was smiling. And I don't think that anyone who has worked for or in or volunteered for a Jewish organization should know that if the lay leadership are leaving a meeting and everyone is smiling and joking with the staff, and we talked about some tough stuff at that meeting. And I remember thinking, this is a good place. This is a place that values the relationship, that values the humanity of the people around the table in a way that not every place does, and really putting people first. And that's sort of where I've taken the past 3 years, and I look forward to helping nurture that in the community moving forward.
I will draw a thread here as well, that I'm hearing, and I hope you hear from all of your clergy, past and present, how much we value you. And that is something that I remember every day, even in the hard days, even in the really, really tough stuff that makes you sort of just want to, face plant into your pillow at the end of the day because it's so tiring. You're doing it with and for good people. That, by the way, was the first thing I said about all of you behind your back. When I was in first round interview, and credit due there, before the first round interview, one Rabbi Stephen Wernick called me and said, you should have a first round interview. But we had a drink in a hotel lobby, if I recall, about that. But there were a number of people on a committee interview that was supposed to go between an hour and a half and went about 2.5 hours. And Norm Cohen, who is on here, was on that committee. It was run, of course, by Glenn Unterberger of blessed memory, along with Jonathan Schiffman, who is here, and Len Bernstein was involved in it. And I met David Ozer of blessed memory, and I'm thinking of all of these people and many others. I'm sure that you're not all on my screen at the same time, but I spent 2.5 hours with this committee, and I got out of the synagogue and walked out the chapel entrance, and my father was picking me up because, you know, he wanted to spend some time with me too in Philadelphia if I was coming in from Detroit. And I said goodbye to Jonathan and to Glenn, and I called Dave up, and she had a stake in this thing of where we were going to move. And she picked up on a half ring because she thought I just hadn't been calling her for the last hour since everything ran over. And so she picked up on a half ring and she said, well. And I said, David, they're good people. They're good people. That was my walk away from the first interaction. And I still feel that. And that was the first thing I said behind your back about you. So I hope that's okay. And those who have joined since, you are also good people because you were attracted to a community of good people, and that relational piece is, as Rabbi Rosen said, the desire to want to be with the people and to be challenged with and by those people, and to sometimes be driven crazy with and by those people with all of our different foibles. That's what makes a community. It's what makes a family, and so that feels it feels nice to hear that. In the experience of others who have walked the path that I currently walk with you, and with Rabbi Markowitz as well. Mindful of the time, I'm going to ask one more question, and some of you have touched on this as already, because it's hard not to see the reality and the challenges that the COVID-19 pandemic has presented, but. If you can give a moment of not being a rabbi, but maybe deciding to be a prophet, you know, since that's really what we do. And what might you imagine coming out, God willing, coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we should all be healthy and we should be safe, and we should be together. What do you see about organized religion, about communal gatherings, if you want to even zoom out from religion, about our style of Judaism, if you want to zoom in? What might we retain? How might we regain what we've lost? And what do you think is just something that we have learned we need to move forward from, as Rabbi Wernick said, and maybe is something that this was such an inflection point, such a rattling moment that it's able to actually shake things up enough to have us reinvestigate or reconsider some of our sacred cows. What might be the things that we retain, regain, or even with some pain reject as we think about communal gatherings and Jewish gatherings specifically? So that's our final guided question, and then I will. I also encourage people to send me if you want some. The chat has been active, so you might want to resend me a chat so I don't have to scroll up and find it if you have a question that you want to make sure it gets highlighted. But I open that up to my friends here. Oh, by the way, one other thing, just to remind you, I was thirsty, so I want to remind you. This is called Wawa. Okay, I'm drinking soda from Wawa. Those of you who are unclear about that, we can reacquaint you. But please share your wisdom.
So I think first and foremost, we have to get away from the notion of membership. And I think we need to open our doors to anybody who is searching. And we have to think of ourselves not as a club, but really as a hub. And you know, the transactional nature of synagogue community is you pay your dues in order to get your high holiday tickets. So the one time of year in which a lot of people think about the synagogue is the one time a year we close the door and we put a barrier up. So I think that's going to take a lot of courage, and it's basically to start thinking about not how many members we have, but how many people are we engaging, how are we changing their lives, and to ask them at whatever level they're comfortable, and then also at whatever level they're comfortable and whatever level they might have wealth to contribute towards that goal. And that also means that you have to you have to know what it is that you're measuring, what you're doing. So I can tell you that at Tzedek, we do 85 pastoral calls a month. They last about 45 minutes. That 46% of them are ongoing pastoral care kinds of things, and the rest are one-offs, which means that there's approximately 550, 600 people a year that we do pastoral work with on a regular basis. I can tell you that we have 50 small groups that engage about 600 unique participants. Small groups, a la Ron Wolfson, are 6 to 15 people. I can tell you that 84% of them feel that being part of a small group has helped them deal with their loneliness and anxiety. 82% of them feel that has brought them closer to Judaism and so forth. And I can tell you that 20% of the people that participate in the small groups are not members of Bet Tzedek. But that 80% of the people that participate in the small groups are contributors to Bet Tzedek. So I think that there's a wholesale revolution that needs to happen in terms of what does it mean to belong to a community, and to think of that community as the mission owns the congregation, and everybody, layperson and professional, we all serve that mission. Now we have to pay for it, which means that we can't shy away from asking wealthy people for big dollars and less wealthy people for a meaningful gift. But you have to be able to put it in terms in which you can show what the impact is of that mission on the lives of other human beings. So I think that's a huge change that happens. Now, some synagogues have already started doing it. You know, they call it all sorts of fancy things, a philanthropic dues model and so forth and so on. Tell you it's all bullshit. It's all about the relationships, right? It's all about the relationships, and you open the doors wide and you go out. The second thing that I'll put, which I think is really, really important in that conversation, and the pandemic showed this, is like previously synagogue life has been, we put out all this information. It's like throwing darts to see where it lands on the dartboard, and we hope to get a bullseye because we've got this great program that'll bring people in. The pandemic flipped that on its ear. Every single congregation during the pandemic called every member of its shul to make sure that people were okay. And in the process of doing that, you learn who's really suffering, who's got food insecurity issues, who lost their job, who took a pay cut, who's got cancer, who's dealing with something else, who's got domestic abuse going on in the house, right? And who needs what sort of interaction or so forth. And so not only do you end up doing more pastoral care than you ever did before, because you've now identified people that did not self-identify previously, but you also figure out who are the people that are willing to do things. Who are the grandparents that you can get together to build a grandparents network and have their grandchildren teach them all how to use Zoom, right? I have a 94-year-old who's now like, you know, Zoom, chatting, FaceTime, like you never would have believed that 2 years ago. And so I think that's an important part of the relationship is you can't just say, I'm here for you, call me when you need me. That doesn't cut it anymore. You have to be proactive, and you need to have volunteers that are calling people, not just to say Shana Tova, not just to say Chag Sameach for Pesach, but 3 or 4 times a year, and to ask the question, how are you doing? Would you like, you know, how are you doing, and how can we help you? And then connecting those resources to them, rather than waiting for people to self-identify. And yes, to Robert, I think that Unitana Tokef definitely is an important lesson from the pandemic. But that again, that's why I'm a conservative Jew, because our tradition, we have a language for this. There's a rabbi in 1587 in Germany in a pandemic who said that if you live in a courtyard and you can open your window and stick your head out and you can see people from their windows and hear their voices, you can count them in a million. If he had Zoom, I have no doubt that German rabbi would have said that Zoom would count as a million in the same way that we did. because we have a language for this. Our tradition has a language for this. We have to hear it and apply it into the new, into this new circumstance.
Thank you. Anyone else want to offer?
Sure. I want to acknowledge the multiple people who have chatted me, both to everyone and privately, to mention Tim Hortons in response to the Wawa comment, first of all. I'm not a huge coffee drinker, but I'd say Wawa is an experience. Tim Hortons is good, but Wawa is an experience. So I had a very unique experience of working as a rabbi during the pandemic. Not actually, that's unfair because everyone did, but I'm not working in a synagogue right now. I'm working at a Hillel and working with students on a university campus. So my experience of working as a rabbi during this time has been very different from a lot of my colleagues here, and also a lot of colleagues in my life who work in other types of settings, and very tough challenges that are unique to the population that is 18 to 22 right now, of trying to emerge into adulthood in from their childhood bedrooms, essentially. And so I've thought a lot about that, and sort of what that means for us going forward. I'm going to ignore the chat because I get very distracted, and I see that we're getting into the Wawa to Morton's wars here. And I will also say, by the way, as a conservative rabbi, I felt like perfectly situated to work in a pluralistic setting. And I think part of our future actually is thinking about how we position ourselves in more pluralistic ways, because we have the ability to speak to a lot of different experiences from this sort of centrist place. And I think it's really important to not just stay in our centrist space, but really learn how to connect more deeply with the wants and the needs of people who want to connect Jewishly from multiple different directions. So I want to say, first of all, that the kids are all right from where I stand, from where I sit. And the reason I say that, and I think that can inform where we're going next, is that none of them want to do virtual programming this year. They are begging us to do in-person programming only. And these are digital natives. These are right? We're talking about people who are very comfortable living lives online. And my students are saying, we don't want that. We want to see people face to face. We just want to sit around a table and eat a meal together. We just make it simple. We want to show up and be with other people. And so I think with that energy coming from younger generations, and I know that energy is there across generations, it makes me feel energized about the future of where we're going. And I'm not in a synagogue context right now, so I can't speak to that as directly, but I know that there is a desire to show up and be in community. And in some ways, the pandemic sort of showed the extreme of what happens when we can only exist in a virtual space. And so even for those most comfortable with it, there's a sense of, this is too much. I don't only want this. I need something more than this. And I think that's really powerful. I also say that what I'm seeing, in some ways, it's my experience of Hillel, especially in Ontario. Most Hillels do not operate much more as a 9 to 5 kind of experience, especially in Toronto, because we do have a lot of commuter students. So I don't spend a lot of my time on Shabbat services where I am right now. And so we have we're building out a vibrant community that's not at all centered on coming to shul on Shabbat morning, which I think has been the focal point for synagogues for so long. And it's a good reminder that while that may be a great connection point for some, it's not for everybody. And in some ways, learning is the new davening. Right? A lot of people are excited about coming together in groups of people over learning and studying and finding personal meaning. So I think our institutions, as they shift, will be in response to the types of gathering that we're all yearning for. And we may, as Rabbi Wernick talked about, differentiate into smaller groups for that in smaller spaces, and that's okay. That's really good too. So just some of what I'm seeing here.
Thank you. Rabbi Rubin, Rabbi Markowitz, want to offer? Go ahead, Rabbi Rubin.
Yeah, I'll just raise the question of what Steve was particularly talking about. They have a large synagogue with 50 small groups meeting. That sounds great. What do we do in small congregations when you may have more groups than we have members? And So it's a challenge, obviously, to take the same emphasis. And in a small congregation, people tend to know each other better. So that could create a nice sense of chevra and togetherness. But then there are challenges when people who all know each other don't always get along with each other, and how to overcome that. And so that's just a challenge for small congregations as opposed to larger ones. But the concept is still there, that people, we have to provide for opportunities for people to get together and connect with one another.
I feel like I've learned so much just listening to what has been shared up until this point. I think just to echo, right, this is a do or die moment. It's an inflection point it sped up a lot of things and it's changed the way that we understand and relate to the world and the way that we even communicate, right? And I think we need to, as a community in particular, we're starting to think about how we communicate differently and what we communicate and to whom are we who are we targeting when in our communication. And I think something that we do well and is going to only become more important is that branding, marketing, and sort of production, sort of a packaging piece of how do we sell the content, how do we make the case of relevancy moving forward for the tradition. I mean, we all know, everyone on this call knows how potent and important Judaism can be and is in our lives. And for, you know, my generation and younger, it's a question of, well, what's the added value from this moment? There's so many things that I could be doing. And I think that it's a matter of us making it as accessible as possible. And that doesn't mean dumbing down content. That doesn't mean sort of diluting what we have to offer. It means speaking the language of people and meeting people where they're at, and being real and genuine with them. And I think that's what, in my limited experience, that's what seems to be resonating and seems to work. And I think everything that has been said about rethinking all of our structures is absolutely on the table. I'm curious to see what is going to happen in the next 10, 15, 20 years, to see what happens to tefillah, to prayer in synagogues, to see how sort of that community organizing model of small groups, small affinity groups, sort of is able to function. And we already have seeds of lots of that here at the Shul. I mean, every 2 years there's a production, right, led by our fearless leader, Lisa Littman, right? And this year they're doing a murder mystery play, and next year they're going to do maybe a musical again, and trying to get that back on. But that's just a small slice of the community, like one small sort of affinity group, as it were. So I think that's an interesting model. And ultimately, right, I think it goes back to something that Rabbi Wernick said at the beginning. It comes down to envisioning with the laity what we want the community to look like moving forward, and where do we want our areas of focus to be, because it can't just be a professional endeavor. This has to be providing a meaningful experience in tandem, in relationship with mutual guidance, right? We have to continue to create something beautiful together, and that excites me, and that energizes me, and I'm excited to do so much of that work between our racial justice stuff and between reimagining even what Hebrew school could look like. We just hired a new education director, and we're reimagining the model. We had a really exciting meeting yesterday where we were thinking about how we can shift the model of what Hebrew school is and how sort of supplementary education has existed. We're at I think something that I saw in the chat, maybe it was Rabbi Wernick, said the inverse of fear is excitement, right? They're sort of flip sides of the same coin. So it's a scary moment to exist because nothing is certain, but it's also a very exciting moment institutionally because we have the potential to do and create and really chart a path forward for the next 50 years or so. So I'm excited to be part of that and to be having those conversations. That excites me.
Can I add something to what Andy just said?
Yeah.
I think I'm going to anyway. I was just asking to be polite, Andy.
I know, and
you know, there's also, we spend too much time in the boardrooms talking about the things that we need to do and not enough time actually doing it. Judaism's been here for so long because it's real. And there are real issues in the world that we have a language for and that we can talk about, racism, equality, poverty, and so forth. They're not just in the Jewish community. We have to stop being so concerned insularly and really, help people understand how these Jewish values, when applied to our modern circumstance, can lift everybody up. And we spend too much time, thinking about the risk and talking about communication and marketing and so forth. And we forget that the best element of a brand is when you actually do the brand, is when you live the brand. And this gets me back to what I said earlier about Len when he was president. When we were able to turn the whole congregation to the membership committee, it wasn't a membership drive. People were feeling good about the relationships the shul had when they wanted people to be a part of it. And when people feel that the commitments that they're making, time, energy, and money, are worthwhile, they're excited about it. They want other people to be there. And so we have this rich tradition that has a language for living a life of meaning and purpose in every generation, including this generation, which has so many things going on in it. We just have to be courageous enough to stop worrying about the structures, both physical and psychological, and to break free a little bit and to ask ourselves, in this circumstance, how might we do X? How might we do Y? As Ariella said, it's not necessarily about getting tushes in shul on Shabbat morning anymore. But that doesn't mean that prayer isn't important. How might we do prayer as an element of the lunch and learn, for example? Do we start with the bracha la'asok b'divrei Torah as a way of adding prayer even to this experience, and to elevate the learning of Torah to a higher plane of spirituality and so forth? I think these are really important questions and conversations.
I'm mindful of the time, and I know that some people really allot this time, but I want to thank all of you. I want to thank all of our panelists, and I want to thank all of you who joined in, knowing that some of you need to sign off. We'll wish you well, knowing that we are the first Wednesday of every month during the programmatic year. The next one is going to fall on Hanukkah, and that leads me to sort of my final moderator comment, which is as follows. We are in, as Rabbi Markowitz said, a moment of incredible uncertainty and opportunity. And as Rabbi Wernick said, this is an opportunity to raise the bar. And whether that we find ourselves in whatever communities we find ourselves, this is an incredibly critical moment. And I feel very grateful as one of the two rabbis and one of the three clergy who are currently serving Adath Israel, to know that we have a lot of momentum thanks to those who have come before us. There's that saying of sitting on the shoulders of giants, and it is rare that part of the benefit of sitting on those shoulders, normally that means that the saying is you sit on the shoulders of giants, you see even farther than the giants, but it is rare that you can sit on the shoulders of giants and interact with those giants in terms of how to vision the future, and that feels incredibly fruitful. It feels that I feel like I've learned and been inspired by all of you, both in your time here and also in this hour that we've had together. We are going to stay on for those who have specific questions. I know there was a question about Toronto, Canada Judaism, and whether it leans more to the right of coastal Judaism in the States. That was a question we didn't get to, and I know that some people need to head out. And since we have some experts on Toronto Judaism right here and Canada Judaism, but But I know that people need to head out, but I just want to again close with the way that we began, which is just saying todah, saying thank you for your service here, your time at Adath Israel, your willingness to give of your time today, and the fuel that you continue to offer to our community and to Judaism wherever you find yourself. It goes beyond. We are proud and happy that your that your teaching and your Torah goes beyond whatever the confines in a digital world are to any one community, and we are just thankful. So we'll conclude with Todah, and if anyone wants to continue on, we can for just a few minutes as well. Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Chodesh Tov coming up. 27 shopping days until Hanukkah, and we'll be back a couple of days after that. Take care, everyone. I know that some of our panelists may have to go as well, so thank you very much as well.
I can stay for a few.
Me too. Ariel, you want to talk about Canadian jury or Toronto jury a little bit?
Yeah, I'm an expert after a year. I don't know.
There's an interesting study, the Canadian version of the Pew Report that came out in 2019. And it really points to what I would call Canadian exceptionalism. Although Canada and Canadian Jews are certainly influenced by the same cultural influences that happen in North America, and you see it, I'm sure Ariella can talk about it, especially in terms of the young people and college students. But there's a couple trends that make the community more traditional. Just some big picture things. The conservative movement is the largest denomination in Canada, followed by Orthodoxy and then Reform. So that already gives you a different perspective of where Canadian Jews find themselves from a denominational perspective. Although the next generation is less denominationally focused than previous generations before, but not to the same extent that you see in the United States. This is still very much a communal organization, partly because there's only 6 major centers where Jews live within Canada, and Toronto being the largest, followed by Montreal, then Vancouver, then where I grew up, junior high and high school in Winnipeg. So Canadians don't really move. You have Bet Tzedek, for example, you have many, many 3rd and 4th generation families that have been here, which makes coming to Toronto as a newcomer, it's easy as a rabbi because I have an automatic door to meet people, but if you're not a rabbi, it makes it a lot harder to meet people. It's a very closed community in that regard. Not that it's mean or people aren't welcoming, it's just that everybody grew up with each other. And so the friendships that have been formed for a long time. The second thing that impacts Canadian Jewish life is the influx of Canadian Jews came after World War II, not as part of the refugees from the pogroms that came to the United States in 1894 to 1926. So there's still very much a 2nd and 3rd generation Holocaust mentality. Anti-Semitism is a huge concern here as a result of that. And pro-Israel advocacy and connection is through the roof. 8 out of 10 Canadians have been to Israel at least once in their lifetime, and the average number of trips is 6. It's an astonishing number in terms of the relationship to Israel. And a lot of that has to do with when people came, which is post-Shoah, post-Holocaust. And so what you have as a result of those phenomena is you have a community that tends to be more, on the one hand, religiously tends to be more traditional, but in every aspect of their lives is liberal. LGBTQ plus issues, climate change is the #1 issue of voters in Canada today. Social issues. Canadians are proud of their healthcare system. Right? You ask them, what are you really proud of? We're proud of our healthcare system and that it's socialized in the way that it is. And so you have this tension between a traditional base for Judaism and a more liberal base of looking at the rest of the world. And so Canada is really unique in that way. But you still, you see today how things are changing, especially in the generational divides. The younger generations are less religiously focused than their ancestors, than their parents and grandparents. But at the same time, culturally, it's very, very strong. I've never been in a community that has more people having Shabbat dinner than here. It's difficult to do Friday night programming in the synagogue because you end up getting grandmothers calling you and saying, "Why are you keeping my grandchildren from my Shabbos table?" So that's one of the things that happen. But it makes it exciting to be a conservative Jew here because you have a large critical mass of people that are educated, that are committed, that have skills, but yet at the same time are struggling with this transition from maintaining that tradition and change and adapting to the times, but also understanding that change is becoming more urgent as the disruption that is happening in the Jewish world is related to the larger disruptions happening in the world in general. That's the Canadian Jewry on one foot, as I see it anyway. Ariel, I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Yeah, no, I think you covered the sort of the major trends pretty well, including statistics I didn't really know, so that was really helpful. I would say that I see that definitely reflected in the students that I work with, that there's a real interest in, spending a lot of time doing programming on Holocaust education, for example, mostly because it's like, this is about my bubby, not because, and also because there's a sense of connectedness, but really it feels it hits very personally for a lot of people in ways that I think is important, but not elevated as much in US communities. I would also say that people tend to say, and I don't know that it's entirely true, that the Canadian Jewish community is 10 to 15 years or a generation behind the US. And I think that's sort of a condescending way of talking about it. But I think there is a little bit of truth in the idea that some of the major questions that the Canadian Jewish community needs to face emerge later than they emerge with a sense of urgency in the US. So for example, right now, there's a big conversation on noticing that there is a higher prevalence of multi-faith families in the Jewish community, at least I can speak for Toronto. And where I'm sitting, I'm like, let's not make the same mistakes that we did in the US of saying, the response is to not be nice, right? Or to be sort of oppositional, but to be incredibly lovingly welcome and excited that we have so many multi-faith families in our communities, and that there's so many families that even having multiple options in their families want Judaism to be a part of it. And how can we make sure that we learn from, rather than saying we're better than our neighbors south of the border because we haven't had to deal with this, to be able to say, let's learn from how they navigated this and what was successful and what was not successful, so that we can make sure that we are approaching now this question or other questions with a lot of information. And so I think that feels like something that is happening now. And that's not the only question it's on. I think it's also just on questions of eventual lower rates of affiliation. Right now everybody joins a synagogue because it's what you do, but that might not be the same thing. I don't know that my students see themselves as joining us and paying for synagogue membership after their parents stop paying for it for them. And so, instead of, there's a lot of precedents to look to help answer these questions. So that's something I hope that will happen where Rabbi Wernick and I are situated right now.
Yeah, I would add to that the membership thing I think is important. There's a lot of phantom members here because parents pay for their even adult children membership. And so that's because it's important to them that they be, to the grandparents, that they be members of the shul. It's not that the next generation doesn't want to be members of the shul, but the way in which shuls again position themselves with that transactional value added proposition, they don't see the value just for Rosh Hashanah, which is why we have to take the conversation out of the sanctuary and really talk about life more than just prayer. But that's true for the US. And I think that there is an opportunity in Canada because the culture is different than what we see in the US, that now as Canadians are beginning to experience what happens with the third and fourth and fifth generations of people that have lived in a land, there's an opportunity to do things differently than the American experience when it was going through the same generational shift. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
I'm apologetic here, but I am going to have to. I'm the host of the Zoom, and I have another Zoom. My commute is short, but I am going to. But that's the nature of Zoom. I am going to have to.
I have a funeral, so I have to go.
Fair enough.
The life of the rabbi.
Thank you all so much. Thank you all for being here. Your interest, your caring. The donation, the giving of your time, rabbis, and I'm grateful. Looking forward to staying in touch and keeping up with one another. But thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
So good to see everyone. So
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.
We're just going to keep waving because it's fun. It's good to see everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
I will end. I'll catch up with you all soon, but take care. I will end the
Sounds good.
Zoom now. Take
Thank
care.
you.